Well, hello everyone. This is Wilson Cole. I'm president of Adams, Evans and Ross and Backdoor Hire Solutions, and I am joined by our general counsel, staff attorney, and lovely daughter Samantha. How are you doing, Sam?
I am doing great for a Monday. How about
I
you?
understand it's been a Monday all day long, and we're barely into lunch. Um, Today, guys, we're going to talk about something that I'm a control freak, but the reason that we're going to talk about it, it doesn't have as much to do about my control freakness of keeping control. I just know the problems that it can bring up if you don't follow this one rule. And that is whenever somebody is turned over for collections, the reason that we always say once you turn them over to collections, make sure that if the debtor reaches out to you, because about half of the time they will, you need to refer them back to us. And the reason for that is the debtor about half of the time will run back to the original debtor. They'll try to make an offer, try to resolve it, make a promise. Then they tell us, hey guys, we've already handled it with the client. There's no reason for you to call us. Then what I personally find is that 90% of the time they don't do any of it, and it almost always sets it up for suit. Now, Sam, from a legal, that's from a collection in a corporation aspect and keeping the pressure on the debtor. From a legal standpoint, there's also some aspects. Kind of share your insight on that.
Well, we've run into issues of it goes through collections, they ignore us, we recommend suit, they get served, they go running back to the client to talk to them, and the client thinks, well, I'll have an open conversation and see what they have to say, and then I'll send it back to the attorney. The thing is, then it now opens up a whole giant he said, she said on, the debtors. The debtor calls the attorney and don't worry, they've accepted a settlement of, and that wasn't even discussed, but you're now having to argue, wait a second, was there an acceptance of the settlement? Or if everybody's going behind attorneys, it just gets into this very complicated web of backroom deals that, in all honesty, rarely come together.
Will really come together, and it also gives them a defense on, well, they agreed to do this or they agreed to that. This is almost an extension of when the debtor tells you they're not going to pay you. We've done a couple of videos on, you almost need to look at it as you've been Mirandized, you have the right to shut up. Truly, once it comes to us, that needs to almost be even exaggerated to where your people don't have contact. If they reach out to you via email, perfect example, we had one come in Friday. We made a call on it, had a personal visit. The debtor sent out a payment this morning, called the client. It was a partial payment. Called the client. Basically said, hey, it's already been turned over to collections. You need to talk to Wilson. They turned it back over to us. I talked to the debtor, and we were able to get the debtor to agree. And roughly is $25,000, $30,000 debt. They're going to pay it out over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Had they run back to the debtor or the client, they would have probably stretched it out. Before we got involved, they were telling them they wanted a 12-month payout. Now they're down to a 3-week payout, and they've already paid a third of it immediately. So by us keeping that pressure and that fear of the unknown makes your debtor much more palatable, but it also, or pliable, should I say, but it also puts a layer of negotiation to where when he's talking directly with the client, and they say, hey, would you let us pay out over the next 5 months? The client could, he could hear something in the client's voice thinking, well, that's not a bad deal. You're offering 12 months, to where when they're asking us to do it in 5, it's like, oh, heck no, there's no way. Well, then at that point, we were able to reduce them down to 3 weeks, and we'll have to go back to the client and approve it. And the client, of course, did approve it, but it leaves that fear of unknown to where the debtor can't read from a collection standpoint. The debtor can't read what's going on, and especially once we up that ante, because the second, from a collection standpoint, that they think that they've negated us, then we've lost our ability to contain it. Once it goes legal over in Sam's group and one of the forwarding attorneys are suing it, it creates we have literally had debtors claim defense that there was an agreement made where, after the fact, after suit was filed, and our client swears that they didn't agree to anything. So it comes down to that he said, she said. So it's an extension of that Mirandizing that we've talked about, is when they tell you they're not going to pay you, shut up. When you turn it over to us, if they reach out to you, we want to know about it, but refer them back. You can tie us in on the email, and that's a natural progression. And we're not going to be, everything that we do is a process. We're aggressive, but we're not abusive. And so we're going to try to help that debtor find a way to resolve it, but we're also going to keep pressure on. Sam, any final thoughts on just keeping that line of communication through our office only?
That's really what I come to, because it's so hard. Because there's also, they pick up the phone, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I've had these moments, where it's either a client calling or an attorney calling, where it gets patched through to your cell phone, you don't recognize the number, you answer it, and then you're caught off guard with who you're on the phone with, and I've seen where clients will say, well, that's not so bad, but you'll need to talk to. Well, that phrase of, well, that's not so bad, the debtor hears you agreeing, well, it was just you getting caught off guard. You're, in the car headed to another meeting. You aren't thinking about the other meanings of what you just said.
I agree. And so it kind of ties into that. Just keep that communication from or through us, and also it allows us to be more effective for you, but it also allows you to go do what you do best, and that is put people back to work, whether it's on the recruiting side or whether it's on the staffing side. Go focus on that. You've already had to pay our fee once it gets collected. You might as well get the full benefit of it and let us get releases and things on those lines signed. Because if they send you a payment and you say, okay, well, fine, we'll go ahead and move on. The problem with that is we always like releases on a lot of these things signed, because if they pay you, then you don't have a right necessarily to go after them. But let's say one of their temps or one of your direct hires does something. Sometimes that release can kind of give you a layer, not always, but can give you a layer of defense on that. So just always refer back.
Payment and write something on the check, and your accounting department doesn't realize it, and you just negated the rest of the fee.
100%. And debtors are notoriously slick when it comes to doing that. So it's just much easier to have it come through us. Sam, any departing thoughts before we sign off?
I think that's it.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you next week on our Monday morning meeting.